Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Eric Bland, a litigation lawyer from South Carolina, who is a friend of a friend, and I welcome him today. Eric, I'm glad you're here, and I look
Good.
forward to our conversation. I look forward to learning a little bit about the world of litigation law and what's going on in that
Welcome.
world today. Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you how you came to be a litigation lawyer rather than any other kind of lawyer?
Well, I've always been a kid that spoke his mind. Growing up, I had a mouth, and my mouth was my greatest weapon. And as I became a lawyer, my words became my currency. But unfortunately, I was a real small kid, and so I didn't have a voice that people listened to, even though I had a lot to say. And so when I was about 16, 17, I noticed when I was in a meeting at school, one of the football players walked into the room, and he was big and really a commanding physical presence. And everybody stopped and they looked at him, and he started talking, and everybody had rapt attention on him. And I kind of realized at that point, look, if I was going to make myself different than everybody else, I need to look different than everybody else. I need to sound different than everybody else. And so I started lifting weights. And I learned at the time, the bigger I got, the more people listened to me. There was a correlation with, wow, you're different than everybody else. You're not a kid that's drinking beer at a party. You're the kid that's at the gym. And so I started lifting weights, and I got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I ultimately was a power lifter and a bodybuilder, and I went to college and graduated #2 in my class. And, I didn't drink. I wasn't a partier in college. I studied. I wanted to be a lawyer. And I set myself apart so that I created a uniqueness about me that, wow, this big muscular guy, yet he is smart in terms of grades, and he has the ability to talk and make a point. And it became my persona. And so that's how I became a litigator, because I always wanted to, talk. I wanted to have people listen to what I had to say. And I didn't want to be a lawyer that just drafted documents and stayed in a room. I wanted the profile. I love being in a room. I love commanding a room. Yesterday, I gave a eulogy to 2,500 people at this big funeral for a well-known person here. There was no place I would rather be than at a podium talking to people. And there's a lot of people that don't want to talk to people in a room. They have anxiety about standing up in front of people and having people look at them. That's what, turns my blood. I just love it. I love that thrill of having to stand up and being able to speak. One of the things that I talk about a lot is in this Alex Murdaugh case, and we'll talk about it, I guess, as this goes on. There was a big hearing, and there were cameras from all over the world in this hearing when Alex Murdaugh was determined whether he was going to get bail for stealing $10 million from a number of clients. And I remember that feeling of, okay, I'm going to stand up in front of about 200 cameras, and I got to make an argument. Is my mouth going to open, and what's going to come out? This could either make my career, or I could become a laughingstock. You question yourself all the time of, can I deliver? Can I deliver? And I love that thrill, that good anxiety of having to stand up and open your mouth and speak intelligently and clearly and convincingly. And so that's what made me want to be a litigator. I wanted that thrill of having to convince people I didn't know, jurors and judges of certain positions. And I'm a guy that always bets on myself. I learned that early on, that I don't let anybody else create my destiny. I try to create it for me. I'm always selling. Life is one continuous sales job from when you're a kid, trying to get in college, trying to pitch somebody, do you want to spend the rest of your life with me, as a marriage, convincing your kids, convincing clients to hire you, convincing everything is a sales job. So I'm always closing. I love that from Glenn Ross line, always be closing, coffee's for closers. So, every time I'm out, I'm selling. I don't ever let my persona relax. There's 12 principles that I live by. I taught them to my kids, and I follow them religiously in everything I do. And I found that what it is I try to set myself apart from other lawyers. I'm a lawyer that likes his clients, a lawyer that communicates with clients at different times, day and night, whether it's by text. I'm available 24/7. And there's a lot of lawyers that like to shut it down. I'm in a service business, and there's so many lawyers in this country that a client could choose any lawyer they want. And there's plenty of good lawyers out there. But what's going to separate me from someone else? And that is service, good service. And clients equate good service with being a good lawyer. And to be a good lawyer, you have to be able to listen first and then talk, not talk first and listen. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So you can't fix a problem. You can't come up with a solution unless you listen first. So, for me, it's about being organized. Like you, I see your books are organized. I'm just incredibly compulsive about being organized, organizing my day, organizing my thought processes, organizing my tasks. I don't rely on memory, although I have a steel trap memory. Everything has to be written down and checked off. I act quickly, but never in a hurry. I don't procrastinate. There's a difference between rushing and being acting quickly. I found that the more decisive you can be, the better you are at making decisions. I found people who don't make decisions and have trouble doing it labor over it too long. Look, I'd rather be strong and wrong than weak and right. And what do I mean by that? The more decisions I can make, I know that over time, the average of them become good decisions. So if I make 10 decisions, maybe 1 or 2 are wrong, but they're only wrong by a little bit, and I'll figure a workaround. But I know so many people that can never make a decision because they're afraid to be wrong. I am not afraid to be wrong, and I can admit it.
When a potential client comes to you and they say they want to hire you, and what is it? What you're telling me? Let me say this where I get to that question. What you're telling me is that you're a hyper prepared individual, and you're prepared to face whatever eventuality shows up in front of you each and every day.
Yeah, I'm client driven. I'm client first. So I don't look at who's on the other side, who's the lawyer on the other side, or who's going to be sued. I want to hear what the client has to say first, what the client's problem is first. I'm known as a mercenary litigator. One time in my career, a guy came in and put a 44 caliber gun on the table, pistol, and said, "I need to hire a gunslinger." So for me, I'm client first. I don't like injustice. I don't like bullies. I don't like people who are shut out of the system or feel like that the system is unfair to them because they may not be wealthy or they may not be prominent. I came from Philadelphia to South Carolina. I didn't have any relationships here, and I certainly wasn't going to be part of the good old boy network and break in. The only way I was going to make a success of myself was to take it on. So, I don't belong to the white shoe country clubs. My friends are not lawyers. My best friend owns a trucking repair business, and he's a former felon. He served 1 year and a day for bankruptcy fraud. So I didn't have to worry about, am I going to make enemies in the bar, because I knew I was never going to make inroads. So I'd rather, almost be looked at as an enigma, somewhat feared, than try to break my way into the good old boys club.
Yeah, you're describing a perspective on life and of work, career, which I find uh, very familiar. It describes a lot of the way I approach things. I treat people as individuals. I don't see them as a label. I don't I don't make those distinctions. I look at the person and I decide on the person. And in some cases, I make bad decisions on who I'm willing to trust. But I'm willing to trust because I see something there that's worth investing my time and my own interest in.
Well,
And
don't get me wrong. I spent my life only being around difference makers.
I understand
If it was a difference maker in their gym or a difference maker in a class or a professor, I didn't have time to waste with people that could bring me down, because you only have one reputation, sacred trust. And if you lose that reputation, you never can get it back. So that's why I wasn't a partier. I never did drugs, never been arrested. I never put myself in situations where it could affect my reputation. And one of the principles that I live by, it's the fifth principle, is you got to be mean when it counts, tough when necessary, all throughout your life. You have to learn when to say no to somebody. No, I'm not going with you to this party. It's going to get me back too late. I'm not going to be able to sleep. I can't get up and work out. It's going to affect my next day. No, I'm not going to drink tonight. And I don't make judgments against other people that do, but I wanted to have a reputation that I was different than everybody else. And, I saw my father lose his job when I was 16, and I made the decision that I was going to always have my own business, my own law firm. Yes, I went to work for the largest law firm in Philadelphia when I got out of school, but I quickly knew that, my personality wasn't going to fit in an organization. So 3 years afterwards, I came down here in South Carolina in 1991, opened my own practice. I'd never had a desire to have a big law firm, large law firm. I've had the same partner since 1998. We have one associate. I do the work. We do the work ourselves. Clients hire us and they expect us to do the work and talk. We're not guys that just, pass the work downhill. So for me, it was about being around people that can enhance me, help me, make me different, make me learn things. So I always told my kids the same thing: be around the difference makers. Don't hang around with people that bring you down. Only be around people that can lift you up. And don't let anybody craft your reputation. You craft it for yourself.
so when you're in the midst of a trial, and it's a jury trial, and you're representing your client, what is it that you think are the keys to being effective in your role as a litigator for your client? What are those principles?
Well, you have to know the subject matter. You have to give the impression that you believe in that subject matter and you believe in your client. It's not just an act. So I have a very type A, in your face personality. It's a bulldog personality. I'll punch it to your face. I won't stab you in the back. And my partner has a dissimilar personality. He's very cerebral. He's very intellectual. He measures twice, cuts once. He will cut you with a razor blade 1,000 times and you won't feel it. You'll get up from the witness stand and you leaked all your blood out. Me, it's a punch in the face. And I do measure twice and I cut once, but you wouldn't know it because I do trust my judgment and instinct. And so, I pounce, and sometimes it works and sometimes juries are very receptive to it. But too much of Eric is not a good thing, and too much of my partner Ronnie is not a good thing. So we balance each other out. That's why we've been partners for 24 years, is because we have a similar desire to serve our clients, a similar desire. He was a third generation pipe fitter, my client in the Naval Shipyard, and my partner in Charleston. So he wasn't born into the blue blood society. but we have very different styles of getting to the same spot. I'm a multitasker. If I don't fit 50 pounds of crap in a 25-pound bag, I don't feel like I'm living every day. He's single task oriented. He focuses on one thing. I got to have 10 things going at once. I read 3 books at once. I watch 3 separate series at one time, binging, on Netflix or Hulu or whatever. I don't like sitting on my hands. I'm always moving. If you aren't moving forward, you're moving backwards. That's my motto.
On your bio on your firm's website, it speaks to your interest in storytelling. Would you talk about that? What is the role of storytelling in a trial?
Well, I think you have to give something to the jury that when they go back there, they want to advocate for you. So I try to talk to 2 or 3 of those jurors throughout the trial. I'll see if they're receptive to me. They're making eye contact. They'll start nodding. I want them to be my lawyer in the jury room. So I have to tell them a story that's compelling and credible that they're going to be able to argue in that jury room. And what I like to do is to me, life is nothing but a camera. You snap pictures and that picture becomes a story. And in fact, yesterday when I gave this eulogy, the person I gave it for just got convicted for murder. And he was in prison for 9 days and he unfortunately committed suicide. And he was an extremely well-known businessman in our city. Incredible, 9 restaurants. And on Valentine's Day in 2016, he opened a car door and his wife was having sex with another man. He was threatened. He pulled out a gun. My client had a concealed weapons permit and he shot the guy. He tried to argue self-defense. Jury didn't believe it. I didn't try the case. Another lawyer did because I was a witness, and he was convicted of murder. So if you can imagine a businessman with very little blemishes in his background commits murder, commits a shooting, and then gets convicted of murder and then goes to prison. And what I tried to make the theme of the eulogy was, don't look at the last images of Greg Leone, of him in handcuffs or him in a prison unit. Let me give you the picture of his life, because 5 seconds doesn't define a man's life. The picture I want you to have, and snap these pictures, is him coming to this country and becoming a U.S. citizen, being incredibly charitable, sponsoring all these little league teams, paying off mortgages for families, supporting 50 families in Mexico that are impoverished, all these different things, how religious he was, that he went on a 300-mile trek for Jesus in Mexico through the mountains without ever training for it, walked 300 miles in honor of Jesus. And so snapping photos for the people that were there so that they'll forget about the Greg at the end and remember his life. Well, the same thing in a trial. You want to focus on your good points for your client, what you're trying to accomplish, and then turn those jurors loose in that jury room to parrot what you've just taught them for a week or 2 during the trial.
I get it. And I've known a lot of people where their the disparity between some of their acts and some of their benefits are like that. And when you have a memorial service like that, that's the sort of thing where you get to address those kinds of questions. I had a
Look,
friend.
any chance I get, I talk to people and see if you're resonating with them. I have a podcast that we do weekly, and we have, over 400,000 people that listen to our podcast. I mean, it's insane. And I have over 37,000 followers on Twitter, and I tweet a lot, and I want to see the feedback that we get from our episodes or some of the things I tweet about. And I learn and talking to people, who never maybe will get a lawyer in their life yesterday, and trying to convince them that, my client is and friend Greg Leone is in heaven, even though he murdered somebody, even though he just committed suicide. We had this funeral in a Catholic church. Both are sins, mortal sins in the Catholic Church. I turned to the priest and I said, I'm going to address some uncomfortable things right now, but Greg Leone is in heaven. And he's in heaven because his good deeds in life outweighed his bad. And I view God as a cosmic accountant. He has good checks and bad checks. You don't know when he's going to do a reckoning or an audit. So you better make sure your good deeds far outweigh your bad. And I went through all the good deeds in his life. And I said, you're not going to convince me that he's not in heaven. You're not going to convince me that he didn't get absolution from God. I refuse to believe that a just and benevolent God would not grant absolution to somebody like Greg Leone. So it's, again, I'm selling. As long as my mouth is moving, I feel like I'm in good shape. I always used to say, if I could do the talking for my clients, I would, but you can't always. So, I bet on myself constantly in life. I'm a different type of person. I'm 61 years old. I work out all the time. I'm always moving. If you see me, I'm walking, I'm in the gym, I'm skiing, I'm golfing. I'm not sitting around. I'm fishing, I'm playing with my dogs. My heartbeat's always got to be moving. I get it that we only have a finite number of heartbeats, but I'm going to test that limit.
Get it. I get it. I totally agree with you. You have been involved in probably the most publicly aware legal case of the 21st century, I would say.
Yeah, it is. It's the O.J. Simpson of the 21st century. I was
about to say that. The Murdoch trials. I guess it's a series of trials. I think we have a good feel for who you are as a person and as a lawyer, but does the inclusion of the spectacle nature of a trial that has global interest, and it's not just the evening news, it's just not the local newspaper, but actually entertainment media organizations become interested in it. They want to create create series about this stuff. How does a lawyer in the midst of all of that stay focused on what is essential to your client?
Well, for me, I was on the right side of right because I represented victims of his theft during his law practice, where he stole almost $10 million from a number of clients over an 8-year period. So I knew I was on the right side of right on that. And I was single-minded in trying to figure out, how am I going to get compensation for these victims? Alex stole all this money, but according to his lawyers, he was an opioid addict and the money can't be found. So then I had to get creative and say, well, he couldn't have done this alone over 12 years. He had to have help. So then I went after the banks that held his money. I went after his law firm. I went after the associates that he brought in on cases. And I used the press, and the press used me. I knew that I had a bullhorn, but I knew that bullhorn wasn't going to be heard unless I was able to go on TV and I was able to get into the newspaper. So a combination of TV, newspaper, and the podcasting, I reached an entire world. And so I became somewhat of an expert on the Murdaugh matter, so that when the murder trial came around, I was on the side of the government. Everybody else, all these other defense attorneys, Mark Aragos and all these other attorneys, and Dershowitz, that I would battle every night on the news programs, whether it was Como or Anderson Cooper or Fox News. And I went on every station because the more I could talk, the more people would listen. I was on the government side, and I believed that the government had a case and proved their case. And sure enough, the jury came back in 3 hours and found him guilty. So it added additional credibility. I was willing to talk. I'm brash. I would make comments that were attention getting, headline grabbing. In one of my hearings, I turned to Alex Murdaugh, I pointed him and I said, it's time for you to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And so I came up with a lot of different sayings that started getting wildfire, and people started making shirts of all my different sayings. And, I developed a personality that was consistent with who I was, but it became a media and television personality. And so now I have the ability of, through a press release or calling somebody up, if it's related to Murdaugh or another case, I have relationships. And so I gave copy to the media and they gave me a platform, and it was a beautiful marriage. There's a lot of people that are scared of the media, rightfully so. But I wasn't, because I was honest with them. I was accessible, and I was willing to say some provocative things that sold copy.
Did you encounter any of these people in the media who were in opposition to you? They really wanted to
No,
you in a bad light?
No, they wanted the story. But yeah, there were some
they were using the
some said, I became too visible, and I'm not looking at the other side, the government, maybe not proving its case. But by and large, no. What did get me in trouble, so to speak, is I was reported to our bar for pretrial publicity. So I'm involved in lawsuits, and yet I'm on TV talking about those lawsuits. And we have a code of professional responsibility that says you have to be careful about pretrial publicity and what you use the media for. You can't try to sway the media that sways a potential jury pool. But we do have a rule that lets us correct misperceptions and misinformation. And there was a lot of misinformation being put out about Murdaugh and different things, or by his lawyers, that I was able to correct. And so what ended up happening is it got into a real personality clash between me and Murdaugh's lawyers, Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin. And that became great copy. And so any chance that we were battling each other or name calling, it was provocative and got everybody interested. And I learned that I could do press releases, and the press releases would generate 50 interviews. And then those 50 interviews would generate 300 newspaper articles. I mean, if you type in my name, and I'm not bragging, I'm in over 3,000, 4,000 newspaper articles in magazines, People Magazine, Wall Street Journal, because if one prints it, 100 print it.
And this today, I would assume, if you're a litigation lawyer, is a part of your strategy for how you're going to care for your client.
Yeah, I want to control the narrative.
Yeah.
So as a plaintiff's lawyer, I control the narrative. We do things that traditionally plaintiff lawyers don't do. We file our own motions for summary judgment, which is a legal motion to make a claim dispositive, where the court could rule in our favor before a jury trial. And we frame the issues. We set the table. We set the agenda. I'm on the front end of noticing depositions. I'm forcing the other side by sending subpoenas out to look at my case. I found that I make more money for myself and for my clients by focusing on 15 cases hard than taking in 100 and only dabbling in those cases. There's other lawyers, and they're successful and they do a good job, but they're volume lawyers. We turn down 20 cases before we accept one, because I have found that if I can focus on one case so hard, and there's a defense attorney on the other side that has 70 cases, sooner or later he's going to say, yeah, that Bland is a pain in the ass. Let me settle this case. And early on in our careers, we had to try a lot of cases. And then we started getting verdicts, large ones. I got a $5.5 million verdict in 2006 with my partner, Ronnie, which was the largest legal malpractice verdict in our state's history. And now, after doing this for 35 years, we don't try too many cases because in mediation, good money is offered to us that our clients can't turn down.
Right. So let me ask you a kind of a big picture question about the justice system in America today. How do you, because there's there's a narrative out there that the justice system no longer works for people, and I don't know that for certain either way, because I've never been, fortunately, I've never been in the justice system in that sense of being accused of something and where I would have to go to trial or anything. So I'm just asking as a very detached bystander, but I hear what is on TV. I see what's on the news. I hear what people say. What is your opinion about the state of the American justice system today?
I think it's the greatest justice legal system in the world, the one we have. Yes, it's being stretched at the seams. Yes, there has to be some changes, but that's with any institution over time. But it's still a beautiful system. We fought the Revolutionary War to have these type of freedoms from the monarchy so that we would have juries determine disputes and not judges and not feudal landlords judging disputes. So I think it's a great system. However, what our founding fathers did not understand is that the political time clock moves faster than the justice time clock. So if you look at what some politicians or Donald Trump is doing, it's constantly filing motions and appeals. You lose, you file an appeal. You appeal, you lose that, you file another appeal. Then it's sent down again to make you act in a certain way. You do it and he appeals again. So what our founding fathers didn't anticipate is that the court system and the appellate courts would be moving slowly. And so you have these election cycles every 2 years or every 4 years or every 6 years for senators. And the problem is there's cases that are not resolved so that when people go to the voting booth, they can go with being fully educated. So if you look, Donald Trump, and I'm not picking on him, but he's lost every single legal dispute he's ever been into. Yes, there's an occasional judge that'll give him a ruling, but then it's overturned by the appellate courts. And these are, by and large, courts and judges that he appointed because they have to adhere to the rule of law. So Donald Trump doesn't care whether he wins or loses in court. What he cares about is, do I have the ability to protract it and extend it? Because if he does, then he pushes the reckoning down the road and, strategies of pardons or, appointing an attorney general to stop an investigation. So our justice system needs to move faster. It needs to be more accessible for all people and not just people that can afford it. Now, with that said, I believe in the jury system. I trust in it, but I trust in myself more. And so most of our cases settle in mediation when we can control the outcome, when we can control how much our clients should accept or how much should be paid, leaving huge decisions to the vagaries of 12 jurors that have their own problems that are being forced, like the Alex Murdaugh jury. They sat for 7 weeks, 7 weeks. They get paid $15 a day. Some of these were hourly workers. They don't have my kind of wealth or your kind of wealth. They make an hourly wage that they live from paycheck to paycheck. So it went on far too long, the trial. Yes, there were important issues, but we have to figure out a way to streamline our system. Some trials should be quicker on a rocket docket, depending on what they are. So the system needs to be massaged, but I believe in it. I would not have any other system in the world. Shakespeare said, kill all the lawyers first. People don't really understand why he said that. He didn't say it because he hated lawyers. He said it because the lawyers are the ones who preserve justice in a civilized society. And if anarchy happens, the lawyers are going to be the ones to protect you. That's why he said kill the lawyers first. But the public thinks kill lawyers first because they're bad people.
The other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would agree with you, and I would agree with you about our justice system. And I think it's been highly manipulated by the press and by political operatives to create a distrust in the system. There's a lot of that across the culture of institutions in the West. We have a lot of that kind of.
Look what's happened in Israel today.
Yeah,
Israel, Netanyahu has
right.
Passed through the Knesset new regulations that curtail the right of the Supreme Court to hear certain cases and the court system to make decisions on legislation. You know, our courts are supposed to review legislation for its constitutionality. We have three bodies of government: executive, legislative, and judicial, and they all work together. That's the beauty of the American system. And what I'm seeing across the world is a move towards autocracy. Italy has the most conservative prime minister it's ever had. You see Erdogan in Turkey. Obviously, you see Putin. You're seeing what Netanyahu's doing in Israel in a democracy. We're seeing, you know, Trump is now running to be president, not on any policies. You don't hear him talking about an economic policy. You don't hear him talking about the border. What you hear him say is, I'm going to seek retribution for those that took the 2020 election away from me. I'm going to eliminate the FBI, casting doubt on the Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, going to curtail the intelligence community, invest more power in the executive branch instead of our system, which is supposed to be a checks and balance. And I'm very scared for where our world is heading. I'm fearful that democracy may be on the way out.
So have you ever thought about running for political office?
Well, they've asked me to run for Attorney General in 2026 of South Carolina, and I'm thinking of doing it. But nobody, I'd love to run for governor or something, but I'm Jewish and I'm from Philadelphia. I don't think it'll happen here in South Carolina, to be honest with you. There is a Jewish governor now in Pennsylvania. Maybe I could have done it there, but you know, I like what I'm doing. I like the freedom of what I'm doing. I'm a full-time practicing lawyer. I have a successful podcast. I'm in a number of businesses. I develop real estate. I sit on the board of a company that just went public. I serve on that board with Governor Nikki Haley and the president of Clemson University. So yes, I'm in the fourth quarter of my career. I don't want to have to sit in an office or a subcommittee meeting for 8 hours a day. I like the flexibility of having a pretty full life. And, you know, in all honesty, the Murdaugh, exposure really gave me this diversity I have in my life at 61 years old, and I like it.
Okay, one last question. Someone who is young, say a Gen Zer, someone who's 20 years old or so, is listening to this, and it sounds to them like they should be considering going into the law. Tell them why they should do that.
It's a noble profession because you're helping people, just like the medicine is a noble profession because you're helping and saving people from injuries and sickness. The law is a noble profession because you're standing up for people that can't stand up for themselves. If you like to argue, it's a great venue for that. If you like to write, there's no better venue than being a lawyer and writing briefs. I think it's important in a democratic society. We have a constitution. We want to make sure that laws are being written properly and that they're being applied equally. Business disputes are really interesting. You have a contract, people draft a contract and they put it in a drawer and they never look at it again until they need it. People who are injured deserve to be compensated. How do you make that argument that what a disfigurement means on a face or the loss of a loved one. How do you quantify it? How do you educate somebody in quantifying it? Look, I always tell juries, look, if somebody was transporting the Mona Lisa, and the train derailed and the Mona Lisa was destroyed, it would be the easiest equation. You'd get a value on it, and everybody in the world would say the Mona Lisa is worth $60 million. The U.S. Army says if you're flying a plane or the Air Force, and it's a $20 million airplane and it's going to go down, eject yourself first, because the Air Force says a human life is worth more than a $20 million airplane. Don't go down with the airplane.
Yeah.
Well, then what is it worth if I'm disfigured as a result of a product? What is it worth if I lose my hand? If we're able to give the Mona Lisa what it's worth, certainly losing a hand, and I'm 23 years old and I'm going to have a life expectancy to 80 years old. What is it worth? Am I going to cut off my hand for $10,000 or $100,000? No, it's worth millions. So it's storytelling. It's moving people from this position over to here.
And ultimately, that's really about the valuation of values for the individual and for society at large. And that's, and for me, that's what I see that you're doing, is that you're placing values at the center of how we interface with one another as persons and as institutions. And I celebrate that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being on here, Eric.
I enjoyed it.
This has been fascinating.
I appreciate it very much, Ed.
And I'm grateful for the work that you've done, and even more so the perspective that you bring to the law and to the justice system. I think it's a message that we need to hear more of, and I'm grateful that you have shared it with us today.
So, well, send me a copy of the recording when you post it.
I certainly will.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for watching the Eddy Network podcast today. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and even more so, if you have a comment or a question, please add that to the site. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time here on the Eddy Network podcast. Bye-bye.
Take care.